On BBC Two now, here's Derek Malcolm to introduce this week's Film Club.
Good evening. Welcome back to the Film Club. Tonight we're going to have the temerity to show you, in its rarely seen complete form, one of the most expensive failures in the history of post-war Hollywood. But wait, don't turn your set off, because Michael Cimino's Heaven's Gate is eminently worth seeing. A flawed masterpiece which may have sunk a studio and been generally reviled, especially by those who've not seen it complete, but which shows Cimino to be a quite exceptional director. It's an extraordinary thing that Stephen Back's final cut about the making of the film has probably been read by more people than actually saw the film. And his book is considered the definitive lowdown on how a film budgeted at $7.5 million ended up costing $36 million and being held up the length and breadth of America as a generic term for disaster, for mismanagement, miscalculation, and ego run rampant.
The 1970s, a decade more culturally packed than a Royale with cheese. You had the disco craze, the progressive rock boom, the Beatles broke up, the fashion, the cars, the mafia, violence, serial killers, mass protests, war. And some of the best movies ever made.
I love the smell of napalm in the morning.
I mean, we're talking Taxi Driver, Dog Day Afternoon, Chinatown, Annie Hall, and of course, The Godfather.
I can't remember the last time that you invited me to your house for a cup of coffee. Even though my wife is godmother to your only child. Let's be frank. I never wanted to.
It all started in 1967 when Bonnie and Clyde signaled the end of Hollywood's outdated studio system. For the first time, Hollywood opened its doors to a new generation of young filmmakers. They were given more creative freedom than directors had ever had before.
I think the climate at the end of that traditional studio period was coming to an end, and it was a little bit of a no man's land, Wild West. And
yes,
the movies that I got to make in the 70s, and I'm pretty much known for 5 years where I made The Godfather and Conversation and Godfather 2 and Apocalypse, and that was purely that we were just running too fast for anyone to stop us.
With little to no studio interference, these ambitious directors were able to crank out masterpiece after masterpiece. Their work was thematically complex, morally ambiguous, and anti-establishment. These were films without heroes, without romance, without anyone to root for. They spoke for a generation disillusioned by the war in Vietnam, an audience that had become increasingly alienated from its elders. These directors were influenced by the revolutionary new waves of cinema coming out from all over the world.
Pretty much when Claude Chabrol's Le Beau Serge opened and kind of announced, in a way, the coming of the French New Wave. That was followed by The 400 Blows, by Breathless, and then it was full-blown. So that almost every week there was a masterpiece, let alone the Italian cinema. There was so much, the Russian cinema, Polish films of Andrzej Wajda. All of this was hitting us at once.
In doing so, they became much more than directors. They were auteurs.
The winner is Milos Forman.
The winner is Woody Allen for Annie.
The winner is Francis Ford Coppola.
The winner is William Friedkin.
My colleague and paisan, Michael Cimino, for the dear.
What began with Bonnie and Clyde in '67 ended with Heaven's Gate 13 years later. It marked the last time it was really exciting to make movies in Hollywood. Over the years since, the once freewheeling days of the 70s vanished. Now, all that remains is a barren landscape of excessive unoriginality. The 70s was truly a golden age, the last great time.
My first IMDb credit is Heaven's Gate, but that was a very particular situation. I was in a lighting setup, and someone told me a joke. Cimino heard me laugh, and he turned around and he said, "Willem, step out." And that was it. I was fired from that. So I don't really count that as my first movie, although if you look hard enough, you will see me. I'm one of the cockfighters. I fight Jeff Bridges' cock.
Michael Cimino's Heaven's Gate is widely regarded as the film that ended the new Hollywood era of the 70s. The film and its director have been blamed for the demise of director-driven film production, steering back towards the control of the studios. It wasn't just that Heaven's Gate performed poorly, it was the cost of the film that became its defining criticism, as it swelled nearly 4 times over its planned budget, financially crippling its production studio past the point of no return. On top of that, the film was universally condemned by US critics. With each review they wrote, the critics competed amongst each other to see who could write the most comedically demeaning reviews. After Heaven's Gate, the box office became the only thing the studios cared about. It was only after Heaven's Gate that we now have the blockbuster.
These are the 50-odd men and women who camped outside a Hollywood theater, some for the past 6 days and nights, to be first in line for Jedi.
I am wondering, why are you here?
I know why I'm supposed to be here.
Why?
Because I got nowhere else to go.
It's thanks to Michael Cimino's success that the studios now no longer allow directors the creative freedom they deserve.
You could argue almost that post-Michael Cimino, the time of the director was over. He single-handedly, whether fairly or unfairly, was the signpost that said, from now on, we're not going to let directors have that kind of power anymore.
Now, I want to be honest with you. For the past minute and a half, I've been lying to you. Well, to be fair, it's not me who's lying. This is the narrative the film industry gives concerning the end of the new Hollywood era of the 70s. The problem is that it's all bullshit. You see, Heaven's Gate didn't end New Hollywood, nor was Michael Cimino's directing the real reason the studios regained control. The real culprits behind the rise of Hollywood's commercial empire are none other than the 2 men who helped build it, Steven Spielberg and George Lucas. Upon its release in 1975, Jaws became a cultural phenomenon. The film's simple premise, likable characters expertly directed by Spielberg, along with John Williams' bone-chilling score, drew in just about everybody to go see it. After a test screening, the producers knew it would be a hit, so they did something no other studio had ever really done before. Normally, films would premiere in just a few theaters in heavily populated cities, where they would hope to impress the critics. Then, they would slowly open up the film in more theaters across the country if the film garnered enough attention through critical acclaim and word of mouth. As an example, George Lucas's American Graffiti, even with its high praise from within the studio, was only given a limited release in LA and New York. It was only after it gained critical and relative financial success did Universal pump in an extra $500,000 worth of marketing and promotion. Jaws, however, was an entirely different beast.
There is a creature alive today who has survived millions of years of evolution without change, without passion, and without logic. It lives to kill. A mindless eating machine. It will attack and devour anything. It is as if God created the devil and gave him jaws. Roy Scheider, Robert Shaw, Richard Dreyfuss.
You're going to need a bigger boat
from the best-selling novel, Jaws, rated PG, may be too intense for younger children.
Universal spent an unprecedented $1.8 million marketing Jaws before its release. The media blitz included about a dozen 30-second advertisements each night airing on primetime network TV.
None of man's fantasies of evil can compare with the reality of Jaws.
That's a 20-footer.
25. 3 tons, Alan.
Did you see that?
This is the extraordinary motion picture version of the best-selling novel, Jaws, rated PG, may be too intense for younger children.
On top of that, Jaws was accompanied by a swarm of merchandise tie-ins on a level virtually unheard of at the time. They sold a soundtrack album, t-shirts, plastic cups, a book about the making of the movie, a movie reprint of the novel, beach towels, blankets, shark costumes, toy sharks, games, posters, and more. So much more. They even went so far as to get the author of the novel, Peter Benchley, to go on set and interview the cast, crew, and producers as a TV special before the premiere.
The producers of the movie are Richard Zanuck and David Brown. I wanted to convey the visceral fear people have of being eaten. And I asked David Brown if that same fear was what he wanted the movie to illustrate.
Oh, indeed. It's the shark's eye view of the human body, the fear of disfigurement, of being maimed, of being brought down to an utterly ignominious, horrifying death for no purpose except to serve a mindless appetite that appealed to us.
Finally, on June 20th, Jaws opened across North America in over 400 theaters, something that had never been done before. By July, it expanded to 700 theaters, and then more than 950 in August. It grossed over $100 million in its first 59 days. Then in just 78 days, it overtook The Godfather, breaking box office records to become the highest-grossing film of all time. The summer blockbuster was born.
Where, you son of a...
In the following 2 years after Jaws, actor Roy Scheider teamed up with director William Friedkin on his next film, Sorcerer. After the success of his previous 2 films, Friedkin was given free rein to make his most daring film. If Coppola was to go off to the Philippines to shoot Apocalypse Now, then Friedkin would set out for the jungles of the Dominican Republic. He refused to be outdone again by the world's most famous director. In his eyes, Sorcerer would become his legacy. The plot interweaves between 4 central characters and their unfortunate meeting in a South American village where, if they want any chance of returning home, they must transport trucks carrying dynamite that is sweating the highly volatile explosive nitroglycerin. Originally, it started off as a modest $2.5 million film, but the budget soon skyrocketed as Friedkin's scope became increasingly more grand. The cost of Sorcerer shot up to $15 million, then escalated to $22 million following an arduous shoot in the Latin jungle. Although production went behind schedule and far over budget, the end product was something to be marveled at. Sorcerer was a truly thrilling experience unlike no other. Never have I felt such pure adrenaline-fueled terror than when I watched these characters try and navigate these massive trucks across this rickety old bridge. Sorcerer was a stunning film, completely deserving of being Friedkin's legacy. However, there was a problem, a big problem, a galactic problem. Sorcerer just so happened to come out a month after Star Wars.
She's rich.
Rich.
Rich, powerful. Listen, if you were to rescue her, the reward would be...
What?
Well, more wealth than you can imagine.
I don't know. I can imagine quite a bit.
You'll get it.
I'd better.
You will.
For over 1,000 generations, the Jedi Knights were the guardians of peace and justice in the Old Republic. Before the Dark Times. Before the Empire.
Star Wars. It is more than just a successful movie, it is a box office phenomenon. The film is breaking attendance records all over the country. Not since Jaws have so many people stood in line to see a movie. As a result, the price of 20th Century Fox stock has doubled in the last 2 weeks.
Star Wars for the first time brought in the concept that a film represented a franchise, that every movie could be sold in all of its little parts. There were products. Every movie became an industry unto itself.
Is finally here. The Return of the Jedi, Part 3 of the Star Wars film phenomenon, which will open nationally tomorrow. And as Mike Jensen reports tonight, hundreds of companies are involved in the Jedi film. For them, the phrase, "May the Force be with you," means let the money roll in.
The Star Wars series has been the most profitable in the history of movie making. Merchandise tie-ins have brought an additional $2 billion in retail sales. And this third movie in the series, Return of the Jedi, is bringing with it the biggest merchandise and promotional blitz ever to come out of Hollywood.
The unprecedented success of Star Wars jump-started Hollywood's blockbuster mentality, giving the studios a new paradigm on how to make even more money than had ever been thought possible. The personal films, made by auteurs in the sake of artistic expression, was over in Hollywood. What made these darker, more critically self-reflective films so popular with American audiences during the 70s was a unified sense of cynicism in the country. But with the war with Vietnam now behind them, the American public was swept off its feet by the alluring escapism of the Hollywood blockbusters. What's interesting is that while New Hollywood did end in 1980, all throughout the decade you still had many unique films of tremendous quality. Films like Blade Runner, The Shining, and Scarface. While these films are seen as masterpieces today, things couldn't be farther from the truth when they first came out. Even Scarface, a film as iconic as The Godfather, was incredibly controversial. Reviews of the film condemned its excessive violence and profanity. The New York Magazine defined it as an empty, bullying, and overblown B-movie. These excellent films didn't seem to be connecting with audiences that had already become accustomed to the attractive simplicities of the blockbusters. Was this really the end? Was Hollywood really going to devolve into this corporate hellscape? Were the good times really over?
Joe Egan and Jerry Rafferty were a duo known as Dealer's Wheel when they recorded this Dylan-esque pop bubble gum favorite from April of 1974. That reached up to number 5 as K-Billy Super Sounds of the 70s continues.
I fall off my chair, and I'm wondering how I'll get down the stairs. Clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right. Here I am, stuck in the middle with you.
In the next 10 minutes, you're invited to visit the refreshment stand, where you'll be greeted with crispy, friendly service.
you'll find juicy cola and mouth-watering delicious orange drink. And there's always a fresh batch of hot buttered orange drink. We're happy to have you with us tonight and hope you'll come back often.
Hello everybody, it's me, New Perspective. Thank you so much for watching my video that took me a f***ing year to make. A whole goddamn year. As you can see in the title, this is going to be a part 1 of 2. Reason being is I just was taking so long to finish this one part that at a certain point I just wanted to get this video out. It was supposed to have like 3 or 4 more chapters, and that just was not gonna happen with the pace I was going at. So I figured, let me just cut it in half and release it as a part 1, and part 2 will come out when it comes out. I did have a Patreon. If you watch my older videos, you can see my Patreon being advertised. Now I had to close that down just because of how long this has been taking me. Like I said before, I've got a full-time job and I got a lot of shit that I'm doing other than this, so there's really not a lot of time that I can really dedicate to this as of right now. I would love that, and that was the point of the Patreon, but I can't just, maybe in the future if I can upload more consistently, then I'd bring it back. But anywho, that's that. Thank you for watching. Part 2 will come out sometime maybe. I don't know.